Patricia Henderson stood at the entrance of her London hotel, checking her reflection one last time in the glossy revolving doors. At 45 years old, with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer sunglasses, she looked exactly like the social media influencer she desperately wanted to be. Her phone, equipped with an expensive streaming setup, was already recording her every move. "Another beautiful morning in London, my lovely followers," she announced to her phone, watching as the viewer count slowly ticked up to 25 people. It wasn't the thousands she dreamed of, but Patricia believed today would change everything. She had a plan that would finally make her famous. The taxi ride to Buckingham Palace was filled with Patricia's constant commentary. The driver, an elderly gentleman named Mohammed, politely nodded as she complained about everything from British weather to the wrong side driving. He had driven many tourists before, but something about this American woman made him uncomfortable. "You know what's wrong with London?" Patricia asked, not waiting for an answer. "Nobody knows how to make good content anymore. Everything's so boring and proper." She adjusted her phone mount, making sure her followers could see her perfectly staged expression of dissatisfaction. Outside the palace gates, the morning crowd was already gathering. Tourists from around the world stood in orderly lines, taking photos and admiring the magnificent building. The royal guard stood at their posts, maintaining their famous stoic expressions despite the summer heat in their traditional red uniforms and bearskin hats. Patricia paid the taxi driver, or rather, tried to pay him in US dollars, causing an awkward argument that ended with her angrily using her credit card. Her live stream viewers watched the whole thing, some already commenting on her behavior. She ignored the negative comments, just as she ignored the posted signs about respectful behavior on palace grounds. "Time to wake this place up," she declared to her phone, marching towards the palace gates with the confidence of someone who had never faced serious consequences for their actions. Her oversized designer bag contained what she called her content creation tools, including a bag of trash she had carefully collected from her breakfast and lunch. The security check at the entrance made Patricia increasingly irritated. The guard asked her to lower her phone while they inspected her bag, but she refused, claiming she was documenting everything for her millions of followers. In reality, her viewer count had barely reached 50, most of them watching with growing concern. Among the crowd, a young British couple noticed Patricia's loud behavior. Sarah and James Wilson exchanged worried glances as they watched the American woman argue with security about her right to film everything. They had visited the palace many times before and had never seen anyone act quite like this. "Look at these guards," Patricia said loudly to her phone, approaching one of the royal guards who stood perfectly still at his post. "Just standing there like expensive mannequins. My tax dollars probably pay for this. Well, if I were British, which thank God I'm not." The guard, Private James Harrison, remained motionless as required by his duty. At 22 years old, he was relatively new to the Queen's Guard, but his training had prepared him for all sorts of tourist behavior. Still, something about this woman's attitude suggested this wouldn't be a typical day at his post. Other tourists began to distance themselves from Patricia, creating a noticeable circle of empty space around her as she continued her running commentary. Her voice grew louder with each passing minute, frustrated by the guard's professional indifference to her provocations. "This is going to be epic," she whispered to her phone, reaching into her designer bag. The morning sun caught the palace windows, creating a golden glow that would have been beautiful if anyone had been paying attention to it. Instead, all eyes were now on Patricia, though not for the reasons she hoped. A palace staff member, watching through a nearby window, was already on the phone with security. Something about this tourist's behavior had triggered their well-practiced protocols for handling difficult situations. But Patricia, absorbed in her quest for viral fame, remained oblivious to the attention she was actually attracting. The stage was set for what would become one of the most notorious tourist incidents at Buckingham Palace that year, and Patricia Henderson was about to learn that some content isn't worth creating. The summer sun climbed higher over Buckingham Palace as Patricia Henderson began what she called her social media performance. Her live stream had now attracted nearly 100 viewers, drawn in by her increasingly aggressive behavior towards the royal guard. Most watched with a mixture of horror and fascination, like witnesses to an approaching train wreck. "Hello? Hello? Can you even blink?" Patricia waved her manicured hands inches from Private Harrison's face. The young guard maintained his professional stance, staring straight ahead as his training demanded. Behind his stoic expression, however, his mind was racing. In his 3 months of service, he had never encountered someone quite this persistent. A group of school children on a field trip stopped nearby, their teacher trying to explain the historical significance of the Queen's Guard. Patricia saw an opportunity and spoke even louder. "Look, kids, this is what we call a waste of taxpayer money. He's not even real, probably a robot." The teacher, Mrs. Thompson, quickly guided her students away, shooting Patricia a disapproving look. "Class, let's move to the other side. Remember what we discussed about respecting traditions." The children followed, some glancing back curiously at the loud American woman. Patricia's phone buzzed with incoming comments. "This is so disrespectful. Someone stop her. You're embarrassing Americans." She deleted these comments with quick swipes of her finger, focusing instead on the few that encouraged her behavior. Her viewer count was finally growing, reaching almost 200. In Patricia's mind, this validated everything she was doing. Sarah and James Wilson, the British couple who had noticed her earlier, were now filming discreetly. "Should we alert someone?" Sarah whispered to her husband. James nodded, already typing a message to the palace's public contact number. "You know what?" Patricia announced to her live stream. "I think these guards need some excitement in their lives. Don't you agree, my lovely followers?" She reached into her designer bag, making a show of rummaging through it. The trash she had collected earlier crinkled loudly inside. Two palace security officers watched from a distance, communicating quietly through their earpieces. They had been alerted to the situation but were following protocol: observe first, intervene only if necessary. Years of experience had taught them that sometimes letting difficult tourists tire themselves out was the best approach. Private Harrison could smell Patricia's coffee-scented breath as she leaned in closer. His training ran through his mind. Maintain position, show no reaction, wait for security if situation escalates. A bead of sweat rolled down his back under the heavy red uniform. "Maybe he's hungry," Patricia said to her phone. "Should we offer him some breakfast?" "Oh wait, I already ate mine." She laughed loudly at her own joke, encouraged by a few laughing emojis floating up her phone screen. The crowd around her had grown larger, but not for the reasons she thought. People were waiting to see what the palace security would do. A young woman in the crowd, Emily Chen, was live-streaming Patricia's behavior to her own followers. "This is exactly what not to do at Buckingham Palace," she narrated quietly. Her video would later become key evidence, though she didn't know it yet. Patricia's frustration grew with each passing minute. The guard's complete lack of reaction was ruining her planned video. She had expected him to break character, to give her something she could use for her social media. Instead, Private Harrison remained as immobile as the palace itself. "Fine," she muttered, loud enough for her microphone to pick up. "If you won't give me content, I'll make my own." She began pulling something from her bag, her movements exaggerated for her viewers. The morning light caught the plastic bag she was gradually revealing. Several tourists gasped, realizing what was about to happen. A few raised their phones higher, sensing an incoming disaster. Palace security took a step forward, their practice restraint about to be tested. Private Harrison saw Patricia's reflection in the palace windows. Something in her expression had changed. The frustrated entertainment seeker was gone, replaced by something more determined and malicious. In his earpiece, he heard the soft crackle of an incoming message from his superiors. "Stand firm, assistants approaching." The tension in the air was palpable. Patricia Henderson was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and everyone except her seemed to realize it. The summer sun climbed higher over Buckingham Palace as Patricia Henderson began what she called her social media performance. Her live stream had now attracted nearly 100 viewers, drawn in by her increasingly aggressive behavior towards the royal guard. Most watched with a mixture of horror and fascination, like witnesses to an approaching train wreck. "Hello! Hello! Can you even blink?" Patricia waved her manicured hands inches from Private Harrison's face. The young guard maintained his professional stance, staring straight ahead as his training demanded. Behind his stoic expression, however, his mind was racing. In his 3 months of service, he had never encountered someone quite this persistent. A group of school children on a field trip stopped nearby, their teacher trying to explain the historical significance of the Queen's Guard. Patricia saw an opportunity and spoke even louder. Look, kids, this is what we call a waste of taxpayer money. He's not even real, probably a robot. The teacher, Mrs. Thompson, quickly guided her students away, shooting Patricia a disapproving look. Class, let's move to the other side. Remember what we discussed about respecting traditions. The children followed, some glancing back curiously at the loud American woman. Patricia's phone buzzed with incoming comments. This is so disrespectful. Someone stop her. You're embarrassing Americans. She deleted these comments with quick swipes of her finger, focusing instead on the few that encouraged her behavior. Her viewer count was finally growing, reaching almost 200. In Patricia's mind, this validated everything she was doing. Sarah and James Wilson, the British couple who had noticed her earlier, were now filming discreetly. Should we alert someone? Sarah whispered to her husband. James nodded, already typing a message to the palace's public contact number. You know what? Patricia announced to her live stream. I think these guards need some excitement in their lives. Don't you agree, my lovely followers? She reached into her designer bag, making a show of rummaging through it. The trash she had collected earlier crinkled loudly inside. Two palace security officers watched from a distance, communicating quietly through their earpieces. They had been alerted to the situation but were following protocol: observe first, intervene only if necessary. Years of experience had taught them that sometimes letting difficult tourists tire themselves out was the best approach. Private Harrison could smell Patricia's coffee-scented breath as she leaned in closer. His training ran through his mind: maintain position, show no reaction, wait for security if situation escalates. A bead of sweat rolled down his back under the heavy red uniform. Maybe he's hungry, Patricia said to her phone. Should we offer him some breakfast? Oh wait, I already ate mine. She laughed loudly at her own joke, encouraged by a few laughing emojis floating up her phone screen. The crowd around her had grown larger, but not for the reasons she thought. People were waiting to see what the palace security would do. A young woman in the crowd, Emily Chen, was live-streaming Patricia's behavior to her own followers. This is exactly what not to do at Buckingham Palace, she narrated quietly. Her video would later become key evidence, though she didn't know it yet. Patricia's frustration grew with each passing minute. The guard's complete lack of reaction was ruining her planned video. She had expected him to break character, to give her something she could use for her social media. Instead, Private Harrison remained as immobile as the palace itself. Fine, she muttered, loud enough for her microphone to pick up. If you won't give me content, I'll make my own. She began pulling something from her bag, her movements exaggerated for her viewers. The morning light caught the plastic bag she was gradually revealing. Several tourists gasped, realizing what was about to happen. A few raised their phones higher, sensing an incoming disaster. Palace security took a step forward, their practiced restraint about to be tested. Private Harrison saw Patricia's reflection in the palace windows. Something in her expression had changed. The frustrated entertainment seeker was gone, replaced by something more determined and malicious. In his earpiece, he heard the soft crackle of an incoming message from his superiors. Stand firm, assistants approaching. The tension in the air was palpable. Patricia Henderson was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and everyone except her seemed to realize it. The next 15 minutes at Buckingham Palace unfolded like a well-rehearsed play, though Patricia Henderson was the only one who didn't know her part. Two more security officers had arrived, forming a protective circle around her while maintaining a professional distance. Her phone was now in a clear evidence bag, still broadcasting to thousands of horrified viewers. This is ridiculous. Patricia's voice had risen to a shrill pitch. Do you know how many followers I have? I can make you all famous. She reached for her phone, but the security officer holding it shook his head firmly. Private Harrison had been quietly relieved of his post, replaced by another guard in an immaculate uniform. As he walked away with perfect military precision, visitors applauded. A rare break from palace protocol that security allowed given the circumstances. Harrison's coffee-stained uniform would later be photographed for evidence. Sarah and James Wilson were giving their statements to a palace security officer. We saw the whole thing, Sarah explained, showing the videos on her phone. She'd been harassing the guard for at least 20 minutes before. Her voice trailed off as she watched Patricia continuing to argue with security. Emily Chen's livestream had gone viral. Her thoughtful commentary and perfect camera angle had attracted over 50,000 viewers. News organizations were already reaching out to her through social media, asking permission to use her footage. "The most disrespectful thing I've ever seen at Buckingham Palace," she narrated quietly. Two Metropolitan Police officers arrived on scene, their appearance causing Patricia to finally grasp the seriousness of her situation. "Wait," she said, her voice smaller now. "You're real police. But I didn't break any laws. It was just a prank for social media." The female police officer, Constable Emma Wright, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we've received multiple reports of assault on a Queen's Guard, disorderly conduct, and public nuisance. We'll need you to come with us to provide a statement." Patricia's designer bag was carefully searched. Inside, they found 3 more bags of trash, suggesting she had planned multiple pranks for her live stream. Each bag was photographed and logged as evidence by a methodical security officer. The crowd had thinned somewhat, but those who remained were still filming. Among them was a reporter from a local news station who had rushed over after seeing Emily's live stream. He stood at a respectful distance, quietly narrating the scene into his phone. "But I'm an American." Patricia protested as Constable Wright began reading her rights. "You can't arrest me. I'll call my embassy." Her voice cracked with the first signs of genuine fear. The second police officer, Sergeant Mike Thompson, was already on his radio. Subject is a U.S. citizen, approximately 45 years old, involved in an assault on a Queen's Guard. Requesting guidance on diplomatic protocols. The response came quickly. Handle according to standard procedures. Inside the palace, a different kind of activity was taking place. Private Harrison was giving his statement, his uniform being photographed from every angle. "She seemed determined to get a reaction," he explained calmly. "When I maintained my position, she became more aggressive." His composure during the incident had already earned him praise from his commanding officer. Tourist groups were being redirected around the scene, while palace staff efficiently cleaned the area where Patricia had dumped her trash. The whole incident was being handled with the same precision and dignity that characterized everything at Buckingham Palace. Patricia's phone had finally stopped live streaming, but not before capturing her complete transformation from confident prankster to worried defendant. Her last viewers had watched as she realized that social media fame came with real-world consequences. "Ma'am, please place your hands behind your back," Constable Wright instructed, holding a pair of handcuffs. "You're being detained for questioning regarding assault on a Queen's Guard and related offenses." As the handcuffs clicked shut, Patricia's face crumpled. The crowd watched in silence as the woman who had arrived hoping to become internet famous was about to become famous for all the wrong reasons. Her designer bag was carefully sealed in an evidence bag, and her early morning prank was quickly becoming a late morning nightmare. The sun had risen fully over Buckingham Palace now, casting no shadows in which to hide from the consequences of one's actions. Inside the palace security office, Patricia Henderson sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, her designer bag confiscated and her makeup starting to run from nervous sweat. The room was small but neat, with photographs of the royal family on the walls watching her every move. Her earlier confidence had melted away completely. "Miss Henderson," said Chief Security Officer Robert Banks, reading from a tablet, "let's review what happened this morning." His voice was calm but firm, like a teacher addressing a particularly difficult student. "You arrived at the palace at approximately 9:15 a.m., began harassing a Queen's Guard at 9:45 a.m., and at 10:05 a.m., you deliberately dumped garbage on an active-duty serviceman." Patricia's lower lip trembled. It wasn't garbage, it was just some breakfast leftovers. For content. Even to her own ears, the excuse sounded pathetic now. The small office seemed to grow smaller with each passing minute. Outside the security office, her story was spreading like wildfire across social media. Emily Chen's livestream had been picked up by major news networks. The hashtag Buckingham Palace Karen was trending worldwide, and clips of her prank were being shared millions of times. Constable Wright sat in the corner, taking detailed notes. "Your phone contains evidence of premeditation," she explained. "The live stream shows you discussing your plans to make content by harassing the guard. You even brought multiple bags of trash, suggesting this wasn't a spontaneous act." Patricia's eyes widened. She hadn't considered how her own livestream could be used against her. "But my followers," she began, then stopped as Chief Banks held up a hand. "Let's review those followers, shall we?" He turned his tablet around. On the screen were screenshots of comments from her livestream. "This is disgusting behavior. Someone arrest this woman. She's making all Americans look bad." Reported to Palace Security. For the first time, Patricia read the comments properly. Her face grew pale as she scrolled through thousands of negative reactions. Even her regular followers had turned against her. One loyal fan had written, "Unsubscribed. This went too far." A knock at the door interrupted the review. A Palace legal advisor entered, carrying a thick folder. "Miss Henderson, I'm Catherine Powell from the Palace Legal Office. We need to discuss the charges being considered against you." Patricia straightened in her chair. "Charges? But in America, pranks are protected speech." Her voice had lost its earlier demanding tone, replaced by growing panic. Catherine Powell opened her folder. "In the United Kingdom, you're facing potential charges of assault on a serviceman, public nuisance, disorderly conduct, and violation of palace security protocols. Additionally, the cost of cleaning and replacing the guard's uniform will be added to any fines." The list continued, each charge making Patricia sink lower in her chair. Her dream of social media fame had turned into an international legal nightmare in less than an hour. Outside the palace gates, news vans had begun to arrive. The morning's events had caught the attention of major media outlets. Private Harrison, now in a fresh uniform, was being quietly praised by his commanding officer for maintaining his composure during the incident. Patricia's phone, still in the evidence bag, kept buzzing with notifications. News organizations were requesting comments. Her social media accounts were being flooded with angry messages. Even her small travel blog was receiving hundreds of negative reviews. "Miss Henderson," Chief Banks said, his tone softening slightly, "do you understand the seriousness of your actions now? The Queen's Guard aren't tourist attractions or content creators. They're trained soldiers performing an important duty." Tears finally began rolling down Patricia's cheeks, smearing her carefully applied mascara. "I just wanted to be famous," she whispered. "I thought it would be funny." "Well," Constable Wright replied, checking her watch, "you've certainly achieved fame. Though perhaps not the kind you were hoping for. The Metropolitan Police van will be here in 10 minutes to transport you to the station." The gravity of her situation finally hit Patricia fully. Her passport was being held by security. Her phone contained evidence against her. Her social media reputation was in ruins. And somewhere in the palace, a young guard was giving a statement that would ensure her prank had very real consequences. The morning sun now streamed through the office's small window, illuminating the dust particles in the air, a stark contrast to the dark reality settling over Patricia Henderson's world. The white Metropolitan Police van pulled up to Buckingham Palace's security entrance exactly on schedule. Patricia Henderson watched through the security office window as two additional officers stepped out, their bright yellow safety vests reflecting the late morning sun. Her makeup was completely ruined now, black streaks of mascara marking the path of her tears. "It's time, Miss Henderson," Constable Wright said gently. The handcuffs made a soft clicking sound as they were placed around Patricia's wrists again. Her designer watch, worth more than most people's monthly salary, now sat awkwardly against the cold metal. Outside, a small crowd of journalists had gathered. News of the American Karen who assaulted a Queen's Guard had spread quickly through London's media circles. Cameras clicked rapidly as Patricia emerged from the security entrance, flanked by officers on both sides. "Miss Henderson, why did you do it?" called out a reporter. "Any comments about the viral video? What do you have to say to the guard?" Patricia kept her head down, but it didn't matter. Her walk of shame was being captured from every angle. The same social media fame she had desperately wanted was now working against her, broadcasting her humiliation to the world. Inside the police van, Patricia found herself sitting next to her designer bag, now sealed in a clear evidence bag. Through the plastic, she could see her phone still lighting up with notifications. The hashtag Buckingham Palace Karen had reached over 2 million mentions in just a few hours. "We're taking you to Charing Cross Police Station," explained Sergeant Thompson from the front seat. "You'll be formally charged and processed there. The American Embassy has been notified of your arrest, as per protocol. The drive through London's busy streets felt surreal to Patricia. Through the van's windows, she caught glimpses of people looking at their phones, probably watching her video. A group of teenagers pointed at the police van, recognizing her through the window. One of them took a picture. At the police station, the processing began with mechanical efficiency. Patricia's fingerprints were taken, her designer clothes were exchanged for a simple gray tracksuit, and her possessions were carefully cataloged and stored. Patricia Henderson, read the booking officer, 45 years old, American citizen, temporary visitor to the United Kingdom. He looked up from his computer. You're being charged with assault on a serviceman in the execution of his duty, public nuisance, and disorderly conduct. Additional charges may be added pending review by the Crown Prosecution Service. The police station's interview room was small and bright, with a single table and 3 chairs. A recording device sat in the center, its red light blinking steadily. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews sat across from Patricia, reviewing the morning's events. "Let's go through this one more time," the detective inspector said, her tone professional but stern. "You arrived at Buckingham Palace with multiple bags of trash, planning to create what you call content for social media?" Patricia nodded weakly. "I didn't think. I mean, in America." "This isn't America, Miss Henderson," Detective Matthews interrupted. "The Queen's Guard are active duty soldiers. What you did constitutes assault on military personnel. Do you understand the seriousness of that?" Meanwhile, at the palace, Private Harrison was finishing his official statement. His commanding officer, Captain William Blake, had personally commended him for his composure. "You did the regiment proud, Harrison," the captain said. "Your restraint under such disrespect was exemplary." Back at the police station, Patricia's fingerprints were being entered into the system. Her tourist visa status was being reviewed by immigration authorities. The American embassy had sent a representative, but their message was clear. They could ensure her rights were protected, but they couldn't prevent British law from taking its course. "Your court appearance will be tomorrow morning," Constable Wright informed Patricia as she was led to a holding cell. "A duty solicitor will be provided if you haven't arranged for legal representation." The cell door closed with a heavy clang. Patricia sat on the narrow bed, her designer clothes replaced by police-issued garments, her social media dreams replaced by legal nightmares. Through the small window, she could see the same sunny London sky that had witnessed her foolish actions just hours earlier. 1 week after the infamous Buckingham Palace incident, Patricia Henderson sat in her Florida home, staring at her laptop screen in disbelief. Her social media nightmare hadn't ended with her return to America. It had only gotten worse. The court in London had been surprisingly efficient. She'd been found guilty of assault on a serviceman, public nuisance, and disorderly conduct. The fines totaled £5,000, plus the costs of replacing the guard's uniform. Her tourist visa had been revoked, and she was banned from entering the United Kingdom for the next 5 years. Local woman becomes international embarrassment. Read the headline in her hometown newspaper. Patricia closed the tab, only to find more news articles about her case. Her name had become synonymous with bad tourist behavior, featured in articles like Worst Tourist Incidents of the Year and When Social Media Fame Goes Wrong. Her phone buzzed with another notification. Someone had recognized her at the local grocery store and posted about it. "Just saw hashtag Buckingham Palace Karen buying frozen dinners." She looked different without her designer clothes and attitude. The post already had hundreds of shares. Emily Chen, whose live stream had captured the incident, had become a minor celebrity in her own right. She was now giving interviews about responsible social media use and respect for cultural institutions. Her follower count had jumped to over 500,000, the kind of numbers Patricia had only dreamed of. Private Harrison's story had taken a different turn. After his exemplary conduct during the incident, he received a commendation from his commanding officer. A children's book author had even contacted the palace about writing a story about a steady guard who stayed strong while being tested, inspired by his composure that day. Patricia opened her email to find another booking cancellation. Her small travel consultation business was in ruins. Who would take travel advice from someone banned from entering the United Kingdom? Her carefully crafted online persona as a sophisticated world traveler had been permanently shattered. "Mom, please come away from the computer," said Jenny, Patricia's 19-year-old daughter. She had flown home from college after the incident went viral, worried about her mother's mental state. Looking at it won't make it better. But Patricia couldn't stop. Her old social media accounts, though deleted, lived on in screenshots and news articles. The video of her dumping trash on the guard had been viewed over 50 million times. It was being used in training videos about what not to do as a tourist and in social media ethics classes. The American Embassy in London had even updated their tourist information page. Respect local customs and law enforcement personnel. Remember that the Queen's Guard are active duty soldiers, not tourist attractions. Everyone knew it was because of her. Sarah and James Wilson, the British couple who had witnessed the incident, had appeared on a morning show to discuss tourist behavior. It was shocking, Sarah had said. She seemed to think that having a phone and some followers made her above the law. Patricia's lawyer had advised her to write an apology letter to Private Harrison. She'd spent days working on it, trying to explain how a middle-aged woman had gotten so caught up in social media fame that she'd lost sight of basic human decency. The letter had been delivered, but she never knew if he read it. Her phone buzzed again, another email. This time it was from a documentary filmmaker wanting to interview her for a series about social media disasters. Patricia deleted it without responding. She'd had enough of cameras and attention. Jenny placed a cup of tea on the desk beside her mother. "You know, Mom, maybe something good can come from this. You could talk to people about what you learned." Patricia looked at her daughter, seeing wisdom in her young face. The past week had aged them both. "Maybe," she said softly, "but not yet. I'm still learning the lessons myself." Outside her window, life went on as normal. People walked their dogs, children played, and somewhere in London, the Queen's Guard continued their centuries-old tradition of standing watch. But for Patricia Henderson, nothing would ever be quite the same. Her 8 minutes of social media infamy had turned into a lifetime of regret, a cautionary tale for the digital age.